My man Josh Thomson is a guy that he has known someone for a very long time. Anthony Rumble Johnson passed away at the age of 38 just the other day. And I know that he was an incredibly close friend of yours. He's one of those guys that you could always count on. You may not have seen him for a month, but as soon as you guys got together, it was right back to the way like you never were apart. All I can say is to his family, my most sincere condolences. And to you, Josh, brother, I am so sorry that you lost one of your brothers.
Yeah, we had a conversation earlier with with Showtime and with Bellator and getting together some content to put together for a tribute to him. I mean, I've told this story, I don't know how many times. He told the story, when I was doing the show with Sammy and the Punk. He came on with Goldie, and then I had him on again, a couple years later, and we've always been close. And the story is, and I mean, for those of you guys that are new listeners, and even the longtime listeners and subscribers to our show, I mean, he meant a lot to me. And the reason why he meant a lot to me was...
All right, brother. These are the things that... The hardest things in life are talking about someone that you truly loved, that you truly cared about, that you wish you could spend. And this is why I tell people all the time, man, understand time is the most precious thing you have, because tell those people that are out there that you care about. Tell them how much you care about them. Tell them you love them, because you never know when you're not going to be able to see them again.
Yeah, I mean, like your parents talk about when you're a kid, right? They say, when you're older, you're going to only have like, say, 3 to 4 friends. Maybe all the friends you have in your life that you call friends will be on one hand. And you just laugh about it when you're a kid, and, AJ was one of those guys that, and the story that I continue to tell, and I'll tell it probably till I die now, just because it means a lot to me. It was that I walked into this hole in the wall gym in LA in Shootbox. It was in this back alleyway. And I was getting ready for a fight. I was down there promoting some nightclub with Knox, which is this clothing line here that I was a partner in and that he was a partner in. And we were basically just silent partners. We were people that helped build the brand. We didn't put any money in, but the guys that did it had believed in us in terms of MMA. And I had never met him before. And I walked into this back alley door, and I opened, as I'm reaching for the door, when you hear someone hitting pads and they're just fucking cracking, and you're thinking to yourself, the fuck is that? You're like, what fucking son of a bitch is hitting the pads that hard?
You've got it exactly right.
I could hear it just whap. Well,
it's one of the things is not everyone hits hard. Let's just be honest. And one of the things that we would do in the back during a fight, if you had someone that was going out for the fight, especially if there was curtains and you knew that your opponent was there, we used to actually hit the pads together because it makes a great sound, and you can do it real fast. Da, 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 and it sounds hard and everything. And it's one of those things that when you're listening, you go, holy shit, who's that hit?
Yeah.
You listen to AJ hit the pads. He sounded like that actually hitting the pads. Yeah. The guy is just blessed with power.
It was just like an intimidation. I walked in, I'm like, and it just so happened that he was there training at the same time, because my buddy Damon, who owns Knox with us, or he's the starter guy who started Knox. He's like, hey man, he can give you some work. And I walked in, and I was just
trying to kill you.
I was just watching him hit the pads, and I was like, wow, how impressive. And it was a Shootbox gym, so I knew that he had probably had MMA, but I was like, the way he was hitting pads, he looked more like a straight boxer or kickboxer. He was kicking the pads as well. I'm like, dude, you're impressive. I go, hey, you have any grappling? And he goes, yeah. He's like, I got 3 fights, and I was like, all right, cool. So I said, you want to grapple a little bit? He was bigger, obviously, than me, and he understood that I had a fight coming up. And he literally was like, hey, let me know. And I didn't know anything really about him. I knew that he was a wrestler. He had some wrestling after we got to talking. He was national champ in NAIA, national champ. He was a good wrestler, phenomenal athlete, obviously. The things that he could do on the pads and the mitts. But all of that was not really what impressed me. He was super humble, super nice. He understood that I had a big fight coming up, and he just flowed with me. He gave me positions. He took positions away. He worked. And for somebody that doesn't know somebody else, and you come in and you're training with them, and a guy who's not on a big stage, those guys aren't always the guys that you want to train with. And he opened my eyes a lot to just understanding the importance of, hey, what can I do to repay you? And I want to thank you so much for just spending your Saturday, and helping me get ready for something. You don't know me. You don't have any skin in the game in terms of you've never met me before. We're nothing alike. You're very humble and soft spoken.
We're nothing alike.
And I'm loud and obnoxious
brash.
and brash. I'm that guy. And he was very, very nice, very humble. And it wasn't even that, John. What it was we had talked, later, let's get some dinner, let's meet up. And he couldn't make dinner. So I was doing the nightclub promotion. And I said, hey, come through, let's get together tonight, and he didn't drink at the time. He had started drinking later on, casually, never was a big drinker, but he didn't drink at the time. And he shows up to the nightclub in an M&M jacket. You know what that is? Like those NASCAR, like the candy M&M. I was like, oh man. And I just started laughing. I was like, this kid, right? Like whatever. And he tells the story about like, hey, one of the first times, he was out and about at, some events and stuff. He's wearing this M&M jacket with a straw hat. And he's like from Georgia. He's from this little town called Dublin, Georgia, out there in Georgia. And I just, when we got to the club, they wouldn't let him in because of the jacket. So I said, well, we'll just check the jacket. And they're like, and I said, I could just put it in the car. So he went and put it in the car. He comes back like, oh no, you got white shoes on, Air Force Ones. You can't get in with the club. So then he's like, okay, look, if I can't do that. I'm like, your jeans are too baggy, y'all. So you got to pull them up. So he pulled them up, and we started and they realized that they just weren't going to let him in. And I'm the guy doing the nightclub promotion. I'm like, what is the problem? And then they just weren't going to let him in. And I had been around and I was one of those guys, John. I'm gonna be very honest with you. When something like that happens, you kind of raise a stink. You raise like, what the fuck? Like, what's going on? Why? Like, what's your deal? What's your problem with the bouncers? This guy with AJ, he was so smooth. He said, hey man, it's not a big deal. Let's do brunch tomorrow. Let's do lunch tomorrow, breakfast, whatever. Just let me know. Hey, it's not a big deal. I'm not a big partier anyways. He just wrapped it up and goes, hey man, you guys enjoy your night. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Let's do breakfast. That right there showed me everything. I wanted to be around him every second I possibly could be around him. And I had him come up to San Jose to train at AKA. And I said, look, I'm going to do something with you. I'm going to do whatever I can to get you in. I brought him up. I had seen him train already a little bit. It's a couple small gyms down in LA when I went back down. And shortly after, when he came up to AKA, I had him train with Fitch and Koss and Swick. And Swick was just coming down from 185 to 170. And Bob goes, look, he's good. He's like, but, I've got these three guys. He's like, I don't need another 70-pounder. What am I going to do? And so I had no one else to call. I called up Joe and I said, hey, Joe. And Joe's like, Joe and we had a little bit of a friendship, Joe Silva. But it wasn't going to get approved through me because my relationship with Dana, my relationship with the UFC at the time wasn't the best. And so I made a couple phone calls, and the person that I called was Ken Pavia. And everyone knows that Ken now. But back then, Ken had some guys. Ken, was helping with Tito Ortiz. Ken was helping with Rob McCullough, Tiki Goshen. He was working with some guys, Phil Baroni. He had some guys that, had a little bit of pull. And so I just said, hey, look, Bob doesn't want to sign him because we got 70-pounders already. I go, you do me a favor, man. Sign this kid. Get him in however you can, whether it's the UFC or any. I said,
and he did UFC. Right away.
And he made one phone call. And Joe goes, yeah, I've already heard about him. Josh called me. He's like, but I need, obviously. And you know what happened? They put him on the Ultimate Fighter. They wanted to get him on the Ultimate Fighter right away. But guess who fucked that up? Gabe Rudiger. Because AJ was walking around 190, 195. And they were like, look, we just went through the Gabe Rudiger situation where he was losing, had to cut down, couldn't make the weight, was getting colonics or whatever. Yeah. Couldn't make 55. He's like, we're not going to go through this again because if he has to fight every week. Yeah. And so they said, look, we're not gonna bring him on the Ultimate Fighter. He's like, just make sure he stays ready. Kid you not, within like 2 to 3 weeks, they called and said, hey, we got to fight for him against Rich Clemente.
Oh no. That was before he fought Rich Clemente. That wasn't his first. No, that was UFC the UFC fight.
That was his first UFC fight.
No, his first UFC fight was against Chad. I want to say it was against Chad.
No, I think it was Rich Clemente.
Really?
Yeah. And then he got submitted, I think, in the third.
Oh no, he won it. Won the one. He lost to Chad Reiner. Yep, before Rich Clemente. There you go. Boom.
Okay.
Because It was at the
So-
Seminole Hard Rock in Florida, Hollywood, Florida. I remember it well because that was the night that Rashad Evans knocked out Sean Salmon with the head kick.
So let me go back then. So what it was they called him on 2 weeks notice. Sorry, not that it was 2 weeks later. They called him on 2 weeks notice. He goes, hey, should I take this? And I said, Rich is tough. He's good, but he's beatable. And we had this conversation about Rich because I remember just that specifically. Like it was either 2 weeks after they told him no, or it was basically 2 weeks notice. He had 2 weeks notice to get in there. He had to cut the weight. I think he still missed the weight in this fight.
He might
have. But he missed it by a couple pounds. It wasn't much.
He came into the Chad Reiner fight, and he got that fight on like a week's notice.
Yeah. So they told him to stay ready.
And he knocked him out in like 12 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, he came out, he threw 2 left hooks, and it was over. Chad Reiner was out. And it was like, and I remember talking to Anthony afterwards. I said, where are you training? And he goes, well, right now I really don't have a place.
Yeah.
Right. And I go, well, just look, you pick the spot. If there's somewhere you want to go, let me know, and I'll help you get there by talking to the people. I know everyone. I said, you need to be training with people. That I said, you got skills, man. You got power. There was no doubt about the power that he possessed. You could just see it.
I mean, you could hear it on the pads the day I walked into that gym. It was just bop, bop, bop. And he was putting the combinations together really well. I just, after it was that 2 week period where he had that fight with Rich, and there was a little bit of him and hawing and stuff. But in that fight, remember, he dropped Rich in the first round. Yeah. And then he kind of gassed himself out. Second round, slowed down, just didn't have the gas tank in him anymore. And he ended up losing that fight. But then, he comes back and he beats Tommy and with the quick 51 second knockout, left him slumped against the fence.
Yep.
My relationship with him, though, John, is I'll just remember him as somebody who, it didn't matter, like you said, it didn't matter that if we didn't talk for 6 months, we didn't talk for a year. It was when we saw each other, we had nothing but respect to each other, nothing but love from each other. And it wasn't that we didn't need to talk about where we've been and what we've been doing. We talked about how are you right now? And that's all we cared about. How are you right now? How are things going? What can I do? Is there anything I can do to help? Where can you? And he never, he was the guy that I helped get to a certain place, but he opened the door wide open for himself. And then when he had some issues after the Ken Pavia situation, and he had, and then the UFC had split ways with him, whatever, with Ken Pavia. And then when he left and went to the World Series of Fighting and over there, he was asking me and Damon, the guy who we own Knox with, to manage him. And I said, look, man, I can't manage you. Like, it won't work for you. I don't want to do you wrong. And sure, I can maybe get your foot in the door here. It was Strikeforce at the time, and then maybe even back to, UFC and the world, all those things. I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to help grow his stardom, his status and brand. And I wasn't going to be a good fit for him. And and this was in the time when he was talking about joining with some other guys and this and that. And as time came on, I remember before he joined with Ali, he had called me up and goes, hey, what do you think? I said, look, I know there's a lot of people that had said things about Ali, but I go, look, everybody that I know that works with him likes his loyalty and likes what he does. I go, that's it. People that I know that does. And so he's like, you know what? I'm going to give it a try. And, and we've talked a couple times about it. He was a guy that he maybe didn't do everything right. He missed weight several times. I got on him. I coached and cornered him for a lot of the beginning portions of his career. He was at Kung Lee's for a while in San Jose when he couldn't train at AKA because they already had 70-pounders there. Our 70-pounders were very weird about the fact that they didn't want him training there, whether it was Fitch and Koss and Swick, and I just said, like, this guy's coming up. You guys are already kind of at the top. You guys were on The Ultimate Fighter. Fitch had already made gains. He was getting ready to fight for the title. Like by the time AJ kind of came along, it was like during that period. I go, he'll be a while before he gets to you guys, and it never even got to that point, but it just was a weird vibe.
Well, he did fight Josh Koscheck.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying it was a while though before it got to that point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I understood it. I understood all of those things. It just was a weird vibe to me, even at the gym for myself, because I'm trying to help somebody get there. and they understood their positioning, but we could have made something different happen in that gym at that time. But that was also during that time when they were trying to get Rashad to fight John. They were trying to get Koss to fight Fitch. They were trying to get Swick to fight the other guys. It was a weird time just in the sport. But with Anthony, he was always a good person. There was a lot of things that people don't know about him, you know. He was raised by his grandmother. Maybe people know that, but he was such a grandma's boy.
Yeah.
Such a grandma's boy. And he was also somebody that did so much to be, he was anti-dog fighting. He did so much to help combat. We did something together. We worked with the charity to help stop dog fighting, you know, and, you know, I know he bred pit bulls, but he was all about just nurturing and loving his dogs. I mean, he had, at some points, he had 11 to 12 dogs at a time because he loved them. He kept them, and sometimes he sold them, and sometimes, but he made sure that he vetted everyone that had taken those dogs. He made sure that they were not into dog fight. He made sure that they weren't, you know, doing other things with the dogs. He was somebody that was very ingrained in just doing good things, you know, and I know a lot of people are going to come out and, you know, it bugs me that I said some things like on Twitter and people take out, and John, we talked about this before the show, is that people take out the negative things and just rip on that. All I've ever done is said positive things about him. That's all I'll ever say about him. He is one of the most sincere people, the most humble people, most soft-spoken people I've ever met. And he is someone that I would do it all over again for, and that lets me know that that's exactly the character that I was looking for in somebody that I needed around me at that time. And he brought that energy that I needed. I needed someone like that.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because my entire experience with Rumble is I was bad juju for him. You know, I'm just gonna say, well, there are fighters out there that look at you like you're either a good luck charm or you're bad luck for them when you're the official. You know, there were fighters that, man, I want you as my official. I always win with you. That's not me, dude. It's you, right? Yeah. But AJ for years said, man, why do you not referee my fights? I said, AJ, I have nothing to do with it, dude. It is not me. It is the commission. I said, I don't know. And he says, well, if I ask for you, I said, if you ask for me, you're not going to get me. I said, because then they're going to say, well, there's a reason there and it's not going to happen. He goes, I just got to keep on fighting. I did 2 of Anthony Rumble Johnson's fight. Both were against your man, DC. Both were for the world title. And, you know, he lost both of those. But, you know, we actually went to a Super Bowl, you know, when you have the Super Bowl, you got the week of the Super Bowl and you got all the radio stuff. And we both ended up at that. And we ended up, you know, doing some shows kind of together and separate right next to each other. And we ended up having lunch and, you know, and just spending some time together. And the one thing that, you know, Rumble made you smile. He was just a good guy. He was a happy guy. And he was always looking for, what are you doing that's exciting you? That was the big thing. What are you doing that's making you excited? This is what I'm looking at. And this is what I'm thinking about starting to do. What do you think about this? And he was always looking towards, what was it that he was going to love to do? You know, and I think that was part of, you know, why he stepped away from fighting for a little bit, was he fell out of love with it. He did love it for a little bit, and then it wasn't there. And even though he was making a lot of money, it was one of the things that I really respected from him was, hey, money was one thing, but spending his time in the proper fashion and enjoying what he was doing was what he lived for. And I say it all the time, man, time is the most valuable thing we have. I wish I had told Anthony how much I appreciated him more. I was able to do that with you a little bit when we saw him the last time. We talked for a while and stuff, but look, you run into certain people that they make your life better. Anthony Johnson made everyone's life better.
Go to mybookie.ag, use that promo code Wayne and they'll give you additional spending cash with your first initial deposit.
100% agree. Nah, look it.